Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Limit Podcast, Season 1, Episode 6. Matt Gibson, co-host, and then over there on the other side, that's Phil Hunt. How's it going, Phil?
It's good. Hey, I wanted to say something before we start. I know that when we're doing these, I'm always looking down, and one guy said, "Dude, are you that bored?" And I'm like, "If you saw, I've got like dozens of baits in front of me every time we do it because it's in the shop."
Yeah.
And like I was sanding on this glide bait master when we were just now. So if I'm looking down, I'm listening. I'll try not to do that tonight because I know it is kind of rude. So
No. I've noticed you do it. Sometimes you do it on the phone too. I'll be talking to you, and all of a sudden I'll hear that. And I can tell you.
I've got so many. I got gobs of distractions that, like, if they're in front of me, I can't help but play around with them.
Yep. So the last few episodes, Phil, we've talked and we've had some pros on. We've had some springtime tactics. I'm really excited about this one. An absolute legend of the kayak world, Kurt Smits, is joining us today. So I'm really, really excited to have him on. 2017 KBF national champion. He's won some Hobie events, and man, he has been a part of Hobie fishing. And I'll just say, just in general, Midwest fishing for a really, really long time. So I'm really, really excited to bring Kurt Smits on. So Kurt, welcome to the Limit Podcast.
Man, thank you guys so much for having me on.
That's great. It's great. So we were actually talking quite a bit before the show here, and we were talking about fishing, and you and Phil are pretty close. So you're just outside of Cincinnati, right?
Yep. I'm on the east side.
East side, yeah. You guys, that Cincinnati kayak culture, that's something that's really, really strong. And man, that's been really strong.
Excuse me for a minute.
It's you guys have like John Gray, like just some great guys that come from that area. I know John's moved down to Florida and doing the mud hole thing and all of that. But what do you think kind of breeds that down there and kind of brings that culture from, basically Cincinnati, Columbus, all of that area right there?
I'm really not. I couldn't really put it to one thing in particular. I think a lot of it has to do with Brian at Strictly Sail. He started the Cincinnati series, and I think that really helps when you have a local series that people can jump into that don't necessarily have a lot of experience. It's not a lot of commitment, money or time, right? Because sometimes time is really hard to come by for people. So, if you live local, you can just run out and do the tournament and be back for dinner. That's kind of a good thing, right? And I think a lot of it is from that, and in reality too. I think where I live, in my area, I should say, I wouldn't want to say your area because I'm not super familiar with Indiana, but it really the kayaking fishing is better than a big motorboat fishing is, because you're getting to these places that are less pressured, and there's more places for us to go at times. Not to take anything away from what the motorboat guys are catching and doing and stuff, but there's just more opportunities for the kayakers to fish, because let's face it, like the Little Miami, you're not taking a bass boat,
right?
Very far up the Little Miami. Or the Great Miami, or the East Fork of the Little Miami, or Todd's Creek. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on and on. And they're all kayakable. And I just think that's it, man. I mean, that's why I bought my first kayak, is because I was tired of bank fishing and I wanted to go fish the Little Miami.
Yeah, is that how you started off? Is fishing kind of those small creeks and things like that, kind of off the bank, and then you kind of migrated into a kayak? Is that kind of the evolution of how you got into kayak fishing?
Yeah, it is exactly. You know, I owned a bike shop, and I had just moved to the east side of Cincinnati by the Little Miami, and we were also had access to a water district lake that wasn't open to the public, but anyone in the water district can go fish there. So I
Yeah.
mean, it's like a lot of people can fish there, but it wasn't like overrun like some
Yep.
lakes get around here. And you know, and I was just fishing from the bank a lot, and man, my buddy got a kayak, a little cheap kayak from Dick's Sporting Goods, and you know, once he got it, I was like, man, I got to get one. And man, as soon as I got in it, it just changed. It made me actually like fishing even more than I did before.
Yeah. Do you remember about what year that was?
2013 maybe.
Oh wow. Okay. So yeah, that's that's pretty early, and then it's crazy to see the evolution and to think in 2017 you going to the KBF National Championship and winning it. I mean that's a lot of ramp up pretty quick there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, really, I got really lucky with the KBF National Championship in that how things lined up was exactly my strengths in fishing. Because at the time, I was really good at like maybe two techniques, right? And really, I was good at one, and I was okay at small swim baits, and then I was really good at like small Texas worms, Texas rig anything. I was just like, as long as it was smaller profile, I felt very, very, very confident at it at that time. And luckily, that's how all the conditions lined up for my strengths on those 2 days. You
Yeah.
know, I mean,
Yeah, that's awesome.
I hate to say it, there's luck involved in all things fishing, right?
Yeah.
You know?
It's always like that. When you win, it's your turn.
Yeah, exactly. I I don't want to say I was unstoppable, but man, it was just like it just worked out. It was just amazing, man. You know, when it's your time, and whether you're ready for it or not, it's your time.
No, that was awesome, and I believe I fished that one in 2017, 2018, and I think 2019 were the KBF National Championships that I fished, and you know those were big stout fields back then too, like because you had all kinds of folks. You know, what was it, Kurt? Probably was 100, 200 anglers in that one at that time, or was it even more than that?
In 2017, I think there
Yeah.
was 300 something in
Okay.
my field, and then the next year it was like almost 700
Yeah.
or 700.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
The year that Dwayne Taft won it, and then when they went to Caddo, it was even more. I mean, it was,
Yeah.
and I mean, let's face it, 2017 was the beginning of kayaks having a national footprint, right?
Yeah.
2000 in 2016 was like the very beginning. I feel like 2015, 16, when Hobie had their event on Kentucky Lake, and then the national championship came around, and those were like the two national events.
Yeah.
And then you heard about the tournament of championships down in Texas was getting a lot of attention, but that's still like a major regional event. It's still not like guys weren't coming down from Ohio for it. But 2016 when Matt Ball won it, the national championship, man, people were from all over the country there. I felt like that was one of the beginnings of the national events. In 2017, I believe, is the year Chad started the KBF trail events, which were the first having Chick and I forget all the different ones that were on it. I think there was East West Harbor was on it that year too. I mean, They had them all over, which was like the first like true national trail we had. I mean, that was the beginning, and it was just, I mean, it's just such a cool time to be involved with it because you got to see everybody and like you get to know all these really good anglers over the years. And some have parted ways with competition,
Yeah.
It happens. They get married or they have kids or start a business, I mean, there's just a lot of things that come up, and then there's some new faces that come in, obviously.
Yeah.
The sport's booming though. I mean, it's just amazing.
Yeah. It really is. And it's great to see how healthy it is from the local level all the way up. With Bassmaster having their series, and I know you fished those as well. But I mean, we see and follow you on the national tours and the regional stuff. But at heart, I think you really like to be in the rivers, don't you? And kind of play around in some of the spots you guys got over there.
Well, I mean, I have an affinity for fish that have stripes on them, right?
Yeah.
Whether they're white bass or hybrids or true stripers, I do like fishing for them, especially when like largemouth fishing is awful, right? Yeah. Like during the winter, late fall, during the crappy weather. And I'm blessed that I got the Ohio River and the Little Miami meets it right here. And there's some other tributaries that I won't mention that I really like to fish as well. Yeah. But, honestly, I think that's like one of the most underrated fisheries in the United States is like the Ohio River. You're not going to you're almost definitely not going to go out and catch a really big largemouth on it. You might catch one here or there, but you're not going to catch like a big bag of them. But man, you can go out and catch like 16 to 18 inch spotted bass on it, which are really good for our area. And they're such aggressive fighters. They're so mean. The crappie fishing can be unreal. And I'm not even a crappie guy.
It's amazing.
What I mean? I just run into them throwing big swim baits. I'm like, oh, there's crappie there. I'll just keep throwing swim baits at them. It's just and walleye, sawguy, the fishing can be phenomenal on it. It's just such an underrated, and every section of the Ohio River is different, right? But I'm very blessed that I've got a decent section. I may not catch 30-inch striper every time I go out, but man, like for instance, this is not a bragging moment, except for to brag about the water. Man, I got to go out and have a couple days on the Ohio River where it was a fish. Every 2 out of 3 casts had a 20-inch plus fish on it. Wow. All day long, to the point where when I went home, I almost went to the hospital. My bicep was hurting so bad. It was locking up on me. I was trying to sleep and I was waking up. My arm was doing this. And it was just like one of the, and it was like 3 days almost of that. It was 2 really good days. And then one day was almost as good. I mean, that's just phenomenal fishing.
Yeah, that's fun.
I mean, they're big, giant. Every one of them was ripping line and taking off. And, oh, man, I just, and those moments don't come around all the time, right? I mean, that's not like every chance. But you got the chance. I mean, and it's right here local. I just love it, man. I just, that's 20 minutes from my house, maybe 15 minutes from my house.
Nice.
What kind of places do you look for the stripers? Because when I've caught them, it's normally around a discharge, or I got into them like really good before, like at the mouth of Loffery Creek on dog walkers, and it was phenomenal. But I mean, like if a guy wanted to go target stripers, I don't know where you would go target them. I mean, what kind of stuff do you look for?
So, I am a really big on creek mouths, flowing water with seams. Like, I mean, and really it's seams. Even out in the river, if you can find where there's obstructions pushing the water and then it comes back together and you can see that visible seam, man, I love fishing seams. Mud lines, anything that there's a seam, I mean, that keys me in. Creek mouths, I really like creek mouths. I would like to fish around them too, not necessarily the mouth itself, but just around there because fish aren't always right at the creek mouths. when they pull off, they usually pull off to some giant structure that's nearby, right? And what creek mouth on the Ohio doesn't have giant submerged trees?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, I swear there's some old growth trees laying out in front of the Little Miami. They are like 150 feet long. The root ball is 12 feet tall off the bottom.
Wow.
12, and it's the root ball. I mean, just monster stuff like that. I think, that's the stuff I target. I mean,
as soon as the river cleans up, there'll be 10 boats at the mouth of the Great Miami.
Yeah. There almost always is, and I'm sure there'll be some. But it's literally any creek mouth. The reason I hit the Little Miami because it's 15 minutes from my house. I also hit some other. Well, but that's the fun of fishing. There can be 15 boats there tomorrow, right? As soon as let's say the river cleaned up, and the fishing would still be good. There's just that many fish around, And the funny thing is like when I come out to the Little Miami and I see people in my spots, I just keep going because I've got so many spots now that I can just keep going. I'll change my day up too. Sometimes I'll be like, well, it's going to be a spotted bass day. I'll just go to my spotted bass spots, But that's what I love about the Ohio. It's just the Ohio. It's just such a diverse fishery, and we're lucky to have it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what baits you mentioned? A small swim bait. I know you enjoy throwing crankbaits. What else do you throw for those big guys mostly?
I would say probably 75% of the time, 3/4 of the time, it's a smaller swim bait.
And when you say smaller, you 375 range or
4 and under, right?
4 and under.
It really changes to what I see there. Like if I see the shad are really small, Bass Pro makes they call it a 3-inch squirming shad. And if you get it in an Arkansas shiner, I don't know why they call it an Arkansas shiner. It looks just like a shad.
Yeah.
And it's like a perfect shad match. But it's not 3 inches. It's like 2 3/4. It's like super small. And man, it matches those little tiny shads so good. And then I got a mold that's like a little bit bigger. And I got a couple different molds now where I make my own swim baits because I can't find those, it's not just that I want the shad color. I want the shad body. A lot of what they're keying in on is the wobble, right? Like if you threw a kayak, you'll still get bites, but you won't get as many because they don't have that flat-sided wobble to it. There's something about that triggers them.
Do you ever throw that storm bait? It's like you can buy them at Walmart. It's called a Wild Eye Swim Shad. They make a 4-incher.
I have not.
It's actually my favorite offshore swim bait for largemouth. I carry the 4s and the 5s, but I've won a lot of tourneys, several tourneys over the years offshore on that little storm, and it's flat-sided, like you said, shaped like a shad, and it has a real subtle tail kick. When you're winding it, it's kind of hard to tell you're winding it, but and I know like for the walleye guys at Brookville, like in the summer, I catch I'm not a walleye fisherman at all, but I think they would be shocked how many big walleye, and they're usually 4 pounds plus, that I catch on that storm swim shad at Brookville, just winding it a foot off the bottom in the summer months.
Man,
I bet some stripers would really eat it.
Yeah, it's funny you say, I know they would. If it looks like a shad and it's flat-sided, they're really not picky. That's the thing. Everyone's like, what's the exact bait? And I'm like, just get, anything that's kind of wobbles a little bit that looks like a shad, and get it around them, get it in the mix, get it down to the bottom. Because honestly, these creatures I find, except for when they're really active, they're on the bottom. These river fish, man, they're when they're active, they're not. But man, when you don't see them like busting on the surface, they're basically on the bottom. 90% of them, they're just hanging out, waiting for. I don't know what they're waiting for, but they're waiting for something.
Well, we were talking about Brookville before we started, and the state has really been stocking stripers in there the last. You probably know more than I do. how many the last 4, 5, 6 years. And Brookville right now is just lousy with 3 to 5 pound stripers. Like I would get into them on dog walkers last summer over offshore structure, and sometimes you would catch them till they destroyed like a spook or what's the Strike King one, Sexy Dog.
Yeah,
like they would just tear a sex. There would be no chrome left on it after one evening, and I don't know how long it'll last before there's no they have bad oxygen years at Brookville and a lot of them die, but right for now it's just lousy with 18 to 22, 23 inches.
Oh, man, you're getting another year, and you're going to be in that 25, 28 class.
Yeah, you didn't know that?
I knew that they've been stocking them, but I have not heard a whole lot. I don't have a bunch of striper buddies on the west side over in Indiana. I don't have any. All my guys keep going farther out east.
Yeah, you can go down and launch at the dam, and that first, I don't know how far you can go in a kayak, but you can normally find them within 2 or 3 miles of the dam there. Oh. And a lot of times, like in early June, when those real small, young of the year shad first start moving out and they're in them big clouds, they'll push them up against the bank. They'll be mixed in with the smallies, and you can really have a blast because you don't know when you get a bite if it's a 3 pound striper or a 3 pound smallie.
It's funny you say that. East Fork Lake used to be really, really good for hybrids before it had a low oxygen die off, and it just really screwed the lake up. But before
what happened at Brookville?
Yeah, it happened. It just sucks. But we'd catch every once in a while. We'd catch giant largemouth underneath the stripers. Like if you could actually get your bait through them when they were active. And I think they would just swim together, and they're just totally working together. And it was almost always when you finally got to the bottom, you'd get a bite down there, and then it would be a big largemouth.
Yeah.
But the lake sucks for largemouth, other than those ones.
Right.
You can never find good ones.
Yeah. When I was a teenager, there used to be a guy came. You might have heard of him. He's probably long gone now because then he seemed really old to me. He might have been our age, you know what I mean? But I thought he was really old. And there was a guy from Middletown, Ohio, whose name was Eugene Clemens. You ever hear of him?
I have heard the name. I don't want to say I know him, but I have heard the name.
He wasn't a very friendly, talkative guy, but I remember when I was a teenager and I really wanted to learn to fish offshore, he was kind of like my hero at Brookville because he was going out there when it was paper graphs and flashers, and I remember I would see him out there like this guy fished constantly. I think he worked at Armco Steel, and if he wasn't working, he was at the lake. He was sleeping, fishing, or working. And back then it was all Hopkins shorties. Like every time I seen him all summer, he was jigging a Hopkins shorty. And I remember I would see him on some of the offshore stuff, and he would be catching walleyes. And then Brookville was lousy with like 20 pound stripers and 25 pounders. And I remember he would catch some big largemouth in them stripers, and I would see him and he would show them to me before, he would. So a lot of times he'd throw them in the box when he was catching them and turn them loose. And I was always so impressed with how knowledgeable he was and the wide variety of the fish that were schooled together out there under that bait.
Yeah, nature's one of those things where I feel like they find a way to work together. Like things like when you see fish, and then there's other fish that come up that eats the parasites off of them. And they let them in the mouths and stuff. I mean, it's just like the wildest stuff, but they just work together, and it's one of those things, and that's exactly what happens. I think those largemouth are just waiting for something that gets killed by the active stripers, and it falls down, and they don't have to work that hard then. They just hang out.
Opportunists, ain't they? I remember I never saw Eugene ever fish in the summer with anything but a 3/4 ounce Hopkins shorty. Never, ever, ever. He would have a gold one and a silver one on, and that's all I ever saw him fish with. And he had to have wrists like Godzilla, you know what I mean, or like King Kong from doing it all the time. And man, I just know he really, really caught a lot of fish in the days when you really couldn't see him. A lot of it was guessing.
Yeah.
A lot
on the bottom, right? I remember watching a show, and they were talking about, because fish finders were so infrequent on people's boats, that to feel the bottom, like that was the thing. They had basically it was a jig without a hook, and you throw it out there, and it was just to feel the bottom. These guys were pitching at that as that, and that actually makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you didn't have a fish finder, that's like the only way you're going to know what's underneath you.
That's the cool part about a Carolina rig. Now Brookville has so many zebra mussels, it's almost impossible to throw one. But you think back in the day, I always had a 1 ounce sinker on a Carolina rig because you couldn't really always tell by looking if it was a hard or soft bottom. And you would get on a break at Brookville and you would just go and drag that sinker. And when you would find rock places, then you would be more thorough. And then you would keep going till you found another rock place with your sinker.
Yeah.
We caught more fish back then. Did you ever notice that?
I feel like I feel like anything pre-COVID, I felt like I caught more.
Yeah.
I ain't gonna lie, man. I said there's a lot of pressure has increased everywhere. I mean, there's
the offshore fish have really gotten smart.
Yeah. Do you see that everywhere, Kurt, that you travel? Like, are there still more fishermen than what there's ever been out there, or is that kind of tailing off, you think? Or
I think it's tailed off a little bit, and I think that's why you're seeing more used kayaks. I'm familiar with them. I've actually been looking at motorboats lately too. It seems like prices have come down on used motorboats as well. So I feel like a lot of those people who bought during COVID, who drove all those prices up, they're finally starting to work back into the market a little bit. But I think it exposed a lot of people to new hobbies that they actually like to do, and I think there's more people fishing now. It's just COVID. I think some of it is there's a lot of people putting out a lot of really good information on how to be a better angler.
Yeah.
So it's easier for the average person to spend 20 minutes on YouTube learning something and then being able to go out and apply it, because they can learn about fishing go on YouTube and just type in fishing Little Miami. Boom. There's guys that have their whole channels are nothing but fishing on there. You can learn so much about fishing the Little Miami, if that's the close by water, or the Great Miami, or Whitewater, or whatever rivers near you. Or body of water, Brookville Lake. Type in how to, fishing Brookville Lake. How many YouTube videos you think that are out there for that? So I think that's also part of it, Yeah. Which is great, because I felt like when I first got into fishing, it was so hard getting real knowledge.
Yeah.
Like you just had to go do it. I just stopped asking people. I just stopped caring what other people were doing.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm just going to go throw a jig and learn a jig one day.
Yeah. And we were actually talking about Strictly Sail earlier, and they have that pretty special deal where they have the swap meet and all of that stuff. And you've presented there many, many years, and there's been quite a few other speakers as well. That's also like that information is much easier to get now at events like that and things. Like, I feel like when you put some of those presentations on, I've seen a number of them, you kind of spill your guts out there, and you really do a nice job of going through detailed information to where, when you're trying to find information from back 15, 20 years ago, it gets pretty tough. Like all the way back then, like all we really had was the ability to either read a magazine or try to go on and read some forum online maybe, and that was it.
Were you guys like always excited about checking the mail when it was Bassmaster time? I knew I got it the same time a month every time, and you check the mail every day because you can't wait to get it, because there wasn't all this internet and all this social media.
And they had like the tips section in there, what I mean? Like they had different baits with tips on how to fish them and stuff. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, honestly, I didn't even care about so much about a lot of the articles in there, except for like the tips section, man. I was just like so consumed with trying to learn.
Yeah.
I think you're right. There's a lot more people doing really good stuff. Thank you so much for the compliments. I can't tell you, to someone who wants to impart knowledge to others, to hear that, it's just like it's a really good feeling. And there's more people. There's a lot of people doing that. There's a lot of people who do it really well, much better than myself, on YouTube, live, in person. And that's I mean, there's a lot of bad things that come from social media and stuff, but that's one of the good things. right?
Yeah.
That comes from it. And I just remember how close-lipped everyone used to be, right? Like I'd go ask the crankbait guy, what rod do I need? And he lied to me.
Right.
The local guy lied to me. I'm not going to mention his name, but I've never forgotten
They
that,
all
man,
lie.
Fucking lied to me about it.
It used to upset me because when I was young and I first started fishing tourneys, and I belonged to this bass club, and I fished out of the back of the boat, even though I had a little boat to learn. And like, if you wasn't in the boat with them, the whole club lied. That was just like accepted. That was what was expected. Like, if you asked them, they were going to lie.
Yeah.
And we had one guy in there one time, and I remember thinking, like, how is he catching them? How is he catching them? And we're going to this event, and I never actually got to fish with this guy, and I really liked him, but he was the biggest liar of all, because he always was telling me he was doing this or that, and he was on this big roll. And we went to this place called West Boggs Creek in southern Indiana, and he won the first day, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm out there in the trees where you were. And I'm thinking, I didn't see you. And he's like, yeah, I'm just throwing a big worm, letting it sink on slack line. Well, I ran into him the second day, and he was up there as far as you could get your boat, up in a backwater area, throwing like a big single bladed with a number 7 blade, winding around all those foot deep logs. And I watched him net 3, and I thought, you freaking liar. You know what I mean? And it looked like he didn't feel bad about lying either. It was just part of the game. Everybody thought, well, if you don't want to lie to, don't ask.
Yeah.
In some ways, I feel like we're a victim of our own success in the fishing industry, right?
Yeah.
There's so many people putting out good knowledge to help people out that we now have so many more people doing. It's just a victim of our own success, because I know there's places like I used to go and I knew everybody's name who fished there, not who kayak fished there,
Right.
but everyone who fished there, I knew them on a first name basis. There is no place I can go around me where I could say that now. There's so many different people. I see so many different faces. The little local, tiny little lake that is not worth traveling to, I see different people there every time I go.
And the sad part is a lot of them aren't as friendly as people in general just seem like they're not as friendly, a lot of them, as they used to be.
Yeah, there's definitely some of that, I don't know. I don't even know where that comes from, I mean, when you're out in the water and you're in a little backwater section, you're going past each other, just saying hello. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like,
well, now you could be flipping on one end of a lay down and they'll come flip on the other end. 20 feet from your line's 20 feet from yours. And I have the reputation, I guess, of like, that's when I have a come apart, because I wouldn't do it to anybody, and I don't want it done to me, because I just can't keep my mouth shut. If somebody blatantly does that to me, I figure it's a game on.
Yeah. I usually don't say anything at all and just keep fishing. And I'll be honest, I have video edited. I had to edit that stuff out, because when I leave that in, man, it's just like it gets so much negative attention.
Right.
I just edit it out now. Like, when a guy's right in front of me, right where I'm casting, and just comes right in with his boat, I'm just like.
Yeah, it takes away from your message and what you're trying to get through. So, yeah, I totally get that. So.
I try to keep my blood pressure low. I'm in a kayak. They're usually in a motorboat.
I've ruined my morning before by losing my cool over that. When you're right, if I would have just kept my mouth shut and kept fishing, I probably would have caught a whole lot more.
Yeah, because they end up going through because they don't know what they're doing anyway. Usually, right? They're putting their boat in the good spot, so they obviously don't know.
Yeah.
Right. Because I'm not one to cast into a bad spot. I'm always I look at the good spot to cast.
Yeah.
I had a guy throw a Cinco over my buzzbait last fall in a tourney, and it got wrapped around my buzzer blade, and I like totally come unwound.
Yeah.
I mean, like, and he got upset because I got upset because he cast it over my bait. He didn't even get it. The thing is I honestly don't think he thought he did anything wrong.
See, that's the problem, right? That's the problem, because people honestly, and I hate to say this, they honestly don't understand like the basic rules sometimes. And when a situation that comes up like that, what can you say that will sink into that guy that will make a difference the next time. There's nothing you can say to that guy at that moment.
Yeah.
They're not receptive. You know what I mean? That's how I feel about it. I'm just like, there's no positive. If I could think of some way or something to say that would have a positive impact on the next time, I would say it. But man, I just don't have.
It's not worth it anymore. You just gotta kind of just go on and keep fishing. That's it.
Well, you got to watch too, because some people are just unhinged. I had a buddy that come into one of the docks at Brookville last year alone after dark, or what's been 2 years ago. And there was 3 guys drinking, and they're sitting on the dock fishing where you're not supposed to fish, but no one cares at night. And he said, "Hey, can I just tie up here to this side for a minute?" Or this is what he told me. Now, maybe he mouthed off. I don't know. But he obviously had to tie up to get long enough to go get his truck. And they just decided they were going to whoop him. And had he not had his handgun in the boat, I believe he would have got it, because he said, "Hey, these 3 dudes were drunk enough. They were going to hurt me." And he had to get his handgun in his hand and walk up to the truck and back down to the boat with his handgun, because he told me, he said, there was not a soul around, and I really thought I was going to get it.
God, man. I mean, that just sucks.
Yeah, over parking your boat there for 10 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
and that's the thing. You don't know who's packing and who's not. And, I just don't even want to be in a situation where I have to hurt somebody or they have to, whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just don't even, I let it go now, man.
Yeah.
I was at a tournament and someone was like, "Why didn't you say something to the guy?" And it was in a tournament and he cut me off. There was no question. He cut me off. He came around me. I was working down a bank, right? Blah, blah, blah. And someone said, "Why didn't you say something?" I'm just like, whatever, man.
Yeah.
I'll just go the other way.
Doing what you're doing, you have sponsors, I'm assuming, and you got to be careful too, because someone will video you and say, "Hey, look what he did." That's just not good for you. You got to really watch with social media nowadays.
Yeah, that's true, because you can edit video to make it look like whatever you want.
That's right.
But hey, let's talk about. We were having a really interesting conversation. If you want to have this conversation, before you were talking about something that I never ever thought about, because I got a lot of respect for the kayak guys, because just from the sense of, like, I fish out of a 21-foot Phoenix, and sometimes it's hard to control them. So how you guys do it in the wind, I have no clue. I don't think I have the patience for that. But you brought up something. We were talking about losing fish, and I said something about sometimes I think my problem was I've changed rods, and maybe I was trying to flip with a rod that had the wrong action. And you brought up the fact that you had to consider all that stuff from a kayak standpoint, because the kayak moves a little when you set the hook with heavy line.
Yeah, I mean, that's a real thing for kayakers, because the kayak it doesn't have that much weight to it. So when you set the hook on especially on a big fish, that can pull you into. You lose some of that hook setting power. And on a kayak, we don't have the opportunity to take that step back and snap that rod up, because they take that step back, that's like 3-4 feet of line they've taken up.
You're right.
And we can't step back. So we lose out on some power. So, like Phil was saying, that's one of the things I like to do is, like, there's times that I'll run like a heavier rod than what someone may in a boat, because when I set the hook, I don't have as much of that leverage power either, because there's rods behind me. So when I set that hook like this, I try not to be like hardly past 90, at the end, and that's one of the things that I find that a lot of people you'll hear will run just fluoro, where I'll run braid on almost everything except for my crankbait rod.
Interesting.
It's probably a challenge just to land them compared to being in a big solid platform. I mean, I'm assuming you still flipping bushes and stuff, right? How do you get them? How do you pop them up out of a bush and get them in the boat like that?
Man, I can tell you that there was a fish at Dale Hollow last year that was flipping out of a bush, and I was like 2 feet from the bush, maybe. I mean, it was like a really short distance. So when I set that hook, I basically just kept it going to get him in the boat. And here's the deal with the kayak. When you flip on a big boat, you got a little bit of a platform, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, on that kayak, man, he came across, and I'm in a PA, a pro angler by Hobie, and that's a pretty big boat. It's a 14-foot boat. It's a pretty big boat, but it was such a big fish. He hit one rail and his tail went down, and he like basically jumped over the other rail head first right into my bucket on my side, and there goes my jig out the other side, man. Boom, right back into the water.
Oh.
So, it's a challenge. It's a challenge doing that. And it's basically all I can say is any way possible I can get them in the boat. I usually try to net bigger fish, but when they're really close, I just flip them. Because, man, every second a big fish is going crazy and they're close on short line.
Yeah.
Man, they're opening that hole that you put in them massively, massively. Or if you hooked them and it didn't go all the way through and it's just in their skin, they're going to rip it out.
Right. And now
there's
our
so
hooks,
much leverage going on.
Everybody wants these new round bend hooks, and I don't like them because while they're really sharp, they don't have any barb. I mean,
What hook?
None of these new round bend hooks, they don't have barbs like the older Eagle Claw. Like, remember when all of our spinner baits were built on Eagle Claw 253s or whatever, and they were Sproat style, but they had a pretty big barb. And if you look at all these new hooks, Gammies, Mustads, all of them, they have very, very little barb there.
Yeah, that's one of the things you have to be careful. I've noticed that in a lot of new hooks, man, their barbs are super small.
Yeah, and if you made a bait, like remember when War Eagles had that Sproat style Eagle Claw in them for years, and I think the Timmy Pose did for years. And when you hook them, you don't lose them. But I would almost bet you if you tried to come out with a line of baits now with that older style Eagle Claw, they wouldn't sell very well.
Yeah, spinner baits are tough, I feel like. And I feel like for me, that's almost like a secret weapon because so few people throw spinner baits anymore. Everybody's moved on to the chatterbait, which is, I mean, and don't get me wrong, I suck at the chatterbait first off, and I'm way better at a spinner bait. But man, a spinnerbait can just be the right time of year, especially, can just be phenomenal. Mm-hmm. You can run a bank and run trees with it, and you can cover water with it at an exceptional rate.
Yeah. Do you ever fish down at Cedar Creek in Kentucky? I feel like that would be the perfect kayak lake because it's not so big and it's lousy with big ones.
I really like Cedar Creek Lake a lot. I wish it's almost 3 hours for me. I wish it was like under 2, and then I'd go all the time. It is a killer lake, and like you said, it's not so big. Like you can basically in a kayak. I have a motor. You can cover about half the lake, like fish half the lake roughly in a day if you were just covering water. Mm-hmm. It's not too big, and plenty of places to get out of the wind. And it's a phenomenal lake. I mean, it's designed and built to be a trophy bass lake. That's hard. I mean,
yeah, I'd love to go down there. You ever been there, Matt?
No, I have not.
Man, you're really missing out. It is a really, really good lake. It's a hidden gem.
Yeah. Well, if it's that far for Kurt, it's gonna be a heck of a drive for me.
Yeah, it's about a little over 3 hours for me, and you're an hour from me. It would be worth it to go down there and spend the night, though. There's a lot of really big fish in there. They manage it for trophies, and a guy told me that it had Florida strains, but I don't think I believe that. Do you know if that has Florida strains in it?
I believe they recently may have introduced some Florida strain in there. I know there's been some talk, and there were certain lakes that Kentucky picked out that they were going to introduce some in there. Yeah. But I'll tell you what they did do is when they built the lake, they went to the surrounding lakes around it and all over the part of Kentucky and caught big ones, electroshocking, and brought certain big ones in there. So it just started off with big genetics.
Right.
Yeah. Which is
it's full of timber,
man. That's a real thing.
Full of timber.
Big genetics. That's a real thing. That's big fish.
Right. Yeah. First time I went there, Lowen and I went down there with Matt Pano from Optimum Swim Baits. He had flown in from California, and we put the boat in the water at one of them little ramps. None of us had ever been there. and Billy ties on it was when Matt brings in all the what's that dog walker that Ima has? The little stick. Billy ties on a little stick, and we're like, we never threw this, and Matt was filming, right? Like Billy's second cast right off the boat ramp. We just started fishing with the trolling motor. He caught a 5-pounder. Like it was just like immediate. I mean, it is a really, really good lake.
Yeah, you can only have one fish in the boat or something like that. I can't remember the exact terminology.
I don't know. I've never kept one there.
Yeah, it has to be in a certain size. I mean, it's a phenomenal lake. It's a beautiful lake too. And if you ever get a chance, Matt, you should go down. If you're driving past it, it's worth spending some time on the lake. It's just
full of grass
phenomenal.
and full of standing trees, like big groves of cedars and stuff like that. And I won an Indy League there about this time of year once, and I had 39-13 for the day, which that's not 5 fish. It was the same as it was with MLF then. You had to register through MLF, and so you kept every fish. But I had 39 pounds, and I think I only had 8 or 9 fish that day, and I almost got beat. I mean, there were like everybody caught them. It was
that's
really,
just about
really
5
good.
pounds of fish. Jeez.
Yeah, it was like really, really good. Yeah. And like I said, I didn't blow it away. Like everybody had them.
Yeah.
So, Kurt, you've been around kayak fishing for a really, really long time, and depending on who you talk to, they talk about the health of the sport and kind of where we're at now versus where we were. Some call some of the earlier stuff some glory days and things like that. Me personally, I don't think that those were great times, but I think there's also great times ahead of us. Where do you think the sport of kayak fishing is going? Do you think we're heading down more national tournaments? Kind of like, what are your thoughts on the next 5 years for kayak tournament fishing?
So, as far as tournament fishing goes, I see it becoming more of a professional sport. And I'm going to use an example of 2 teammates of mine, Abby Abizanzo and Jody Queen. They just won the team kayak event on, was it Gunnersville?
Gunnersville.
And they just won it. And Z-Man had a post of them in their page, right? And then Tackle Warehouse shared it. So those are 2 non-kayaking companies that have a ton of exposure that those 2 guys just got. Just from 2 simple posts. I mean, and that has changed because, 5 years ago that wouldn't have happened.
Right.
2 years ago it didn't happen. It just happened recently. And and I love Christine Fisher, but she that has broken out of the box and crossed over and gotten a lot of attention from people in the kayak fishing world and outside the kayak fishing world. And that's really hard to do. And we're starting to see that happen more and more with companies opening their minds to kayak fishing, because I don't think a lot of these companies really realize how many people kayak fish. And this isn't just from the perspective of doing tournaments. I just mean in general.
Yep.
The guy in the $150 Walmart kayak is kayak fishing. He's spending money, and everybody in between is. And the sport's growing. Now we've seen a little contraction, like Hobie kind of disappeared, right? There's been kind of a contraction. Well, the economy is not as good as it was. It's harder for the working guy to make a series. So there has been some contraction, and that's going to be here. But when you look overall, man, it's just as competitive, if not more.
Yeah.
And what I see in the future, it's just becoming more legit. These companies realizing that this is a whole nother market that they need to be open to. And I think that's going to help those anglers be able to fish a whole entire series.
Matt and I have talked. I want kayak guys on my team for the PH. I mean, anybody watches this and you want to be part of PH, just give me a call. And I'd love to talk to the kayak. I think it's a big, huge market that like you said, other companies are missing out on.
Yeah. It's a sleeper, man. I mean, look how much money I spend. You know what I mean? And just multiply me by, you know, millions of people across the United States. And, you know, and not everyone is like me either, right? Not everyone's going to be in a $5,000 kayak, blah, 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 and have all this crap and have a just, you know, my kayak is over rigged. I'm saying it out loud. It is completely over rigged. It's ridiculous. You absolutely do not need that much garbage. Man, there are so many people in the $500 kayak, in the $1,000 kayak who are fishing, who aren't in a big bass boat. And because, you know, because quite frankly, the establishment is wade fishermen, motorboats. That's the establishment, right? You know what I mean? Those two markets have been around for, I mean, as long as I can, you know, forever, right?
Yep.
We're new guys, and that market is unbelievably large. And it's also a crossover market because who doesn't wade who kayak fishes?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, so you're kind of doing both.
Yep.
And there's so many people who aren't necessarily doing tournaments who are doing it, who ultimately will work their way up to doing tournaments, right? You're going to buy that $350 kayak. You're going to be like, man, I caught some fish. I think I can fish. Oh, there's a tournament. How much is it? $50. Oh, that's not too bad.
Yep.
I can be back for dinner. Go and do that tournament. They get hooked on it. Next thing you know, they're in a Hobie pro angler with a motor on the back, dual fish finder.
Yeah.
You know, buying nice rods, throwing nice crankbaits.
Yeah. Yep, the evolution of a kayak angler. I mean, that's and you'll hear that story, that same story over and over again with a lot of people that you talk to. Hey, I started out in this, or like in your case, the one, you know, it's time to get off of the bank, and you start off in a kayak, and then all of a sudden you have, if you're anything like me, you have 2 or 3 kayaks laying around now, like, and don't even know why, but they're here, and I love using them, and it's there is just a lot of benefit to kayak fishing,
and the diversity, right? I mean, you can literally. I was over at Sam's, and they had a $349 sit on top kayak. It didn't look good, but honestly, it looked like you could fish off of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it didn't. I mean, it didn't. I wouldn't be real excited if I had to fish off of it because
Right.
I have been spoiled.
Yeah.
But you know, if you're getting into the sport, I'm like, God, that's way better than the $350 sit-in I had.
100%.
You know, and that person right there more than likely will graduate.
Yep.
You know, I mean, that's just that's the diversity, right? I mean, we have kayaks that are mini motorboats, right? Essentially, my kayak has a 3 horsepower electric motor on the back of it.
Yeah.
You know, it's a small, it's 14 feet long. It is a small motor. And then you have a guy in the $350 kayak.
Can you get out of the boat, an attorney, during the kayak? Can you get out of the boat at all?
Some of them you can.
Some you can.
Yeah.
Typically river tournaments, they'll allow you to get out and wade fish and stuff like that.
I wondered, because
Yeah.
like
Usually
I know
have to be
they've had
covered.
some on our Whitewater River, and it's so swift. I wondered how they manage that in a boat.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Kurt, really appreciate you coming on the show. It's hard to believe we're already up on an hour here. I really appreciate you coming on. You have any parting words or anybody you'd like to thank or shout out before we wrap up here?
Yeah, I mean, I've just been incredibly blessed by the experiences I've been able to have in a kayak, and it's just so amazing to be able to see the sport as it unfolds in front of us, man. So if anybody's even thinking remotely about it, reach out if you have questions. I'll be happy to answer. I'm sure Matt will. I'm sure Phil has some amazing amount of knowledge to share.
Yep.
Not about kayaks.
Well, I mean, fishing though, right?
Yeah.
If you're kayak fishing, as soon as you get into the fishing side,
He's good.
you know,
Yeah.
And I would like to thank my sponsors, Fishing Online. If you need something quick, hit them up. They're excellent people. Torpedo Motors. They've been a longtime sponsor of mine. They make the best kayak motors out there, hands down. And their new ultralight travel motor for kayaks is phenomenal. Picasso Lures. They make some really nice lures. It's an American company, man. They're innovative. They make one of the things I love about Picasso, they make a lot of small stuff that's very high quality. You know, a lot of times when you get into those small lures, the quality isn't there, and they make a lot of stuff that you can get that's, you know, whether it's a small jig, small swim bait, whatever it may be. Check out Picasso Lures. St. Croix rods, American-made rods, hard to beat American-made rods. They've been another long time. Actually, everyone on this list has been a long time sponsor.
That's what I was about to say. Like all the way down your list, like those are all companies you've worked for or worked with for a very, very long time. Yeah,
like Miller Tech batteries. You know, they're another one. Hobie kayaks. These guys I've worked with for a very long time, and you know, and it's good to work with like really good companies and develop these really good relationships with them. I mean, and I just got to thank these guys a lot because they enable me to have been able to do some really amazing things and be able to experience a lot of really just phenomenal places to go.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So again, thank you, and also thank you for being such a great ambassador to kayak fishing. That you're a class act, and I know I really appreciate how you represent kayak fishing.
Man, thank you so much. Thanks for having me on, guys. It's always fun talking fishing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So we'll see you, Kurt. So Phil, there's another episode down. Everybody, please go to the YouTube page, The Limit Podcast. Subscribe. There's some things later in the summer that Phil and I want to do live. We have to get that subscription up there for us to be able to go live on YouTube and to be able to do that. Phil, what do you think? First kayak guy. What do you think about the episode?
Oh, I liked him. We talked for a good bit.
Yeah.
We should have been recording when we were talking before the conversation that we had about some fishing and things. He seems like a cool guy. And I have a lot of respect for the kayak guys because I'm sure it's 10 times more difficult, and bad weather, it would be more difficult. And I know you do it. I got a lot of respect for you. And I was dead serious. Like, I would love to have as many as we could get of kayak guys on the staff, because I think the kayak guys probably still fish a little bit more with the kind of product that I build, you know, especially the balsa baits. I think that a lot of those guys are primarily fishing shallow for the most part. And then I want to remind everybody that Solar Bat's having a 30% off sale. If you need the Solar Bat glasses, just get on their website, Solar Bat, and they got a 30% off sale. Then what else, Kurt? Anything? Or Kurt? Matt. Why'd I call you Kurt?
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
No, nothing else. Nothing else. So please, if you have somebody out there that wants to go fishing, get them out in the outdoors, and we'll see you next week on The Limit.
Yep. It was fun.